Check 1, 2, okay. Everybody hear me okay? That's too bad. Good to see you all. Good to be back. First thing I want to do, though, is it's already been done. Bob did that, but all those of you who are here for the first time, raise your hand. That's our future as a church. It's sorry to say, not you old timers. We need you, but if anything else, what we really know is we need the new people coming in to give us some fresh energy. Now, I've had a history, a tradition of a giggle or a groan to begin most of these. Those of you that have been around for a while know that many times I've had to go through the KIP approval process, and sometimes overrode them, and then people booed, notably women, because I didn't listen to her. So this is one that I did listen to. I asked her what she thought about a number of those, and this finally ended up. An atheist was walking through the woods. What majestic trees, he said. What powerful rivers. What a beautiful animals all around. He said all these things out loud, even to himself. As he was walking alongside the river, he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him. He turned and looked, and there was a 7-foot grizzly bear staring at him, drooling and growling. Well, he ran as fast as he could up the path. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the bear was closing in on him. He looked over his shoulder again, and the bear was even closer. He tripped and fell on the ground. He rolled over to pick himself up, but saw that the bear was right on top of him, reaching for him with his left paw and raising his right paw to strike him dead. At that instant, the atheist cried out, "Oh my God!" Time stopped. The bear froze. The forest was silent, and as a bright light shone above, a voice came out of the sky. "You deny my existence for all these years. You teach others I don't exist and even credit creation to some cosmic accident. Do you expect me to help you out from this predicament? Am I to count on you as a believer?" The atheist looked directly up at the light and said, "I suppose it would be hypocritical of me to suddenly ask you to treat me as a Christian now, but perhaps you could make the bear a Christian." "Very well," that deep voice said from aloud. The light went out, the sounds of the forest resumed, and the bear dropped his right paw, brought both paws together, bowed his head, and said, "Lord, bless this food for which I'm about to..." I always have believed that there are two things that every worship service should have. One is a giggle, and the other is that inside groan of truth. And I think if you can capture those two by whatever means possible, it's a success. Many times I believe that if we can go to a meeting or we can go to some place and pick out one thing that is meaningful, it's worth it. Those of us who have this hypercriticalness find that hard sometimes. But I think that's the success. That's the success that Paul in his letters to the Christians in Rome said when he said these words. There's more to come. We continue to shout our praise even when we're hemmed in with troubles, because we know how troubles can develop passionate patience in us, and how the patient in turn forges the tempered steel of virtue, keeping us alert for whatever God will do next. In alert expectation such as this, we never feel shortchanged. Quite the contrary. You and I can round up enough containers often because there are so many of those generous things that God has given to us. If we but just stop and believe in the Holy Spirit. God's blessing to these words this day we pray. Well, 20 years ago, three of us were sitting in a table. Many of you have heard this story, or some of you have, but we're sitting at a table at Keys Cafe in Robert Street, and we said, someone, Bob, Terry McKinley, or myself, said we should have a worship service just designed for recovery people to come to, and we all kind of chuckled. There was no such thing as a recovery church or a recovery worship service, and I did a big search afterwards in the whole United States. There was nobody that did that. There were groups that maybe said some prayers and things, but there certainly wasn't a church, and it never would survive on a bunch of drunks. And so one of us took out a napkin and we wrote down an order of worship, which is very similar to what you have today. It's many years later. I remember distinctly coming back to the church and saying to Deb, who had followed me down from Shoreview, and said, we're going to have a recovery worship service. And that blank stare that she saw, like, oh my God, what does this mean? All these years I've known Deb, and I found her as the glue that held us together for all these years. She's been one of the most remarkable secretaries, administrators, and the most capable and honest of people that I've ever worked with. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention her as the glue that held us together. Well, Bob, Terry, and I set out on a project to try to do something about a recovery worship service, and we used a bulletin similar to what you have here, and very few people showed up at first. Mind you, the church we were serving then at that time had 11, 15 members probably, all over the age of 70, which is young now. But 20 years ago, it was a bunch of old goats ready to die. We gathered together and we formed a mission statement that you still have. Mission statement that says, we are a spiritual community for people in search of growth and healing and recovery. And it was that process that's continued all the way to today. Growth and healing past shame and fear. Growth and healing of some way to have power that we no longer have because our power brought us around these tables. Our power had gone out and we needed different power, real power. And you couldn't find it anywhere else. Well, unfortunately for you folks, Martha asked me to preach quite a while ago, so I could go back through a lot of things. Unfortunately for you, because I got about an hour and a half to share. Most of you will be gone, including Kit. She'll be in the car probably waiting. If I'm lucky, I think she has the keys maybe. But I've gone back through many years of different things that I have said or done throughout this time. And I've looked for what are some of the kernels that go over and over and over? And I realize that those are kernels that I preach about over and over because why? I'm preaching them to myself, right? One of the beautiful things about this church is what is the glue that binds us together is our brokenness. I can't tell. For a year I had an opportunity in my retirement to do a short-term 1-year interim ministry in the Presbyterian church in Ely where I live. And I would say something and I would look out at the congregation and there was this blank stare. Like, what the hell is he talking about? And it's precisely that thing that when I would say those things here, you all would go, yeah, right. Right on, bro. Right on. And it occurs to me we have a different language, but we also have a different sense of self because we have been broken. We know what that is like. It's not about us because left to our resources, we come to the tables as broken people. We come to this church as a broken person. That sets us up as needing something that nobody else, many people don't understand. We need some spirit in our life that's different in the past life because it didn't work. Growth and healing of our past, shame and feelings of fear from our past have permeated throughout almost every one of my sermons for the last 27 years. So when Martha asked me to preach, I went back through and I thought, what are some of those things that I have said or thought about that might encapsulate this 20-year anniversary? The two issues, as I said, that are the primary ones are shame and fear. Notice that it's not about recovery. It's not about how the church should grow. It's not about all those things that many times we hear in the church. It's about our own shame and brokenness and fear. Over and over and over, I was talking to myself about my brokenness, my fear, and my shame. Not that it be healed and never come back, but how could I function now? How could I live this week as a person of shame and a person of fear? Maybe from way ago, way back, but still it's a part of my sense of isolation or fear for the future. So, from one of my earliest sermons, this comes. Remember the story of Luke where Jesus asked Peter to let down his nets in the water of the lake. They have all been fishing all night. Jesus asked Peter to trust him that there is something there that will satisfy his desire for fish. Put your net down deep in the waters, the chaos of life, and trust on the other side of the boat. Trust that there is freedom to confront your fears. Search for those areas of your life that are in chaos, and trust that Jesus will calm the waters of confusion in your life, I wrote. Maybe some of us are in need of confronting the shame that still is a part of our life. Maybe some of us have the need to confront those things of our past that keep separating us from others. Maybe some of us think we're all healed and perfect, but you won't be here long. We're confronting our fears, not looking good enough, not smart enough, not rich enough, not having enough, not being enough. That is what our brokenness is to this day. I wonder how many of us have those nagging feelings, I wrote, stuck way back within our minds and conscience and really haven't understood how we are free to choose life in a different manner today. In hindsight, I look now and I say to myself, those of us in recovery have chosen a different way of life, and often we forget that in living that life and doing the steps, we are that new creation. We are that new person, maybe not for the rest of our life, but at least for now in this moment. I am enough. I am enough this moment. I also searched for what is the primary story that I've told more than any other story throughout the whole 47 years of ministry. It's not a story just for the recovery church. It's a story that must mean a lot to me because I probably have told this story in dozens of different sermons in different ways throughout the time. It's a dog story. Many of you heard this. If you have, just smile and humor me. It's a dog story. It's a dog story about when I grew up in South Minneapolis in 3613 43rd Avenue South. I was about 8 or 9 years old. I'm sorry, Charlie, I'm going to be walking now.
I got you.
It's a story about Frisky and a neighbor friend. Frisky was a golden retriever, the first dog that we had. And you have to kind of excuse me because I see that somebody's kind of napping. Oh, he's back. Okay, continue. You haven't been here when I've been here before, ever. Anyhow, Frisky, 3613 43rd Avenue South, he was a dog that kind of ran the neighborhood. He was a renegade. He was the father of most of the dogs in South Minneapolis. He was never caged. You couldn't keep him in a cage. He'd find a way out. You couldn't chain him. He'd always break. one time he pulled the whole doghouse halfway down the street and broke the whole front piece of the doghouse off. And my dad found him huddled in some backyard where that got caught on a fence. And my dad thought about leaving him there. I was in an apple tree with Jimmy Wydell, my best friend, and we were having an apple fight, throwing the apples from our backyard back and forth, when I noticed that the neighbors put the dog out on a chain. So, Frisky, which was his habit, knew when Buster was going to be let out, and so Frisky went over to have a little chat with Buster, which was his customary thing, to tell Buster he was stupid because he was chained up, and if he was any smart, he'd break free. And they had this conversation. I even saw them play one time. Now you're wondering where I'm going with this story, but just hang tight a second. So Buster was there, but this particular time, when they put on the snap on his collar, they missed, and it just dropped, and they didn't notice it. I noticed it, and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so Frisky came running around and saw Frisky, being as smart as he was, knew that Buster was free. Buster didn't know he was free because he ran to the end of where his chain would have stopped him on the path and stopped dead in the tracks. Frisky knew that he was free and kept running back to him and saying, come on, Buster, let's go run. Come on, I'll show you some things that you'll really enjoy. And the only thing that Buster could do would be bark and whine. Because he was still tied up where? Rein. It occurred to me when I tell this story, and I've told it over and over, that there are so many parts of my life, and maybe yours, that still come up where we're chained to that past behavior, those past fears, those past shame, those past ideas and thoughts. And that's why we come, to look at those things. Say hi to the retreat. He's got a speech he has to give. He excused himself already. So Frisky ran away with Buster still standing in the backyard barking. I remember to myself at that time that is how I feel to this day at certain times. I'm still chained to some of those things in the past and still unable to break free. Some 2,000 years after Jesus walked on the water and asked them to fish on the other side of the boat, I understand it takes tremendous courage, no matter if you have 1 day or 1,000,000 days in the program, to face each day new, as a new gift, trying not to be bound by our past, chained up to the history that we have, that we carry, and walk in these doors with today. What new things do I need to look at myself about, to see the tremendous gift that God has given us of today? So these 2,000 years later, we sit around and ask to be freed and free of so many things. 20 years later, is fear and shame still a part of our heart? 20 years later, is loneliness still a part of my life today? 20 years later, do I really want to be free? Am I willing to go and stand up for freedom? Here's the most interesting part for me, spending this time looking over past sermons. It's still a part of me. I thought I'd be perfect by now, at least. I know, kid, you think I am, but So I want to share a couple things. I want to share a couple things about this stress of push for freedom, about how this church has helped so many thousands of people throughout time. Over and over, I have seen this worship service be a time as a teacher. I've seen sponsor after sponsor bring in their sponsee, dragging them in through those doors. What the hell am I doing here? He said or she said we have to come. He's going to talk about that Jesus stuff, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And a year later, over and over, they have stood up and said, you know how important Jesus is in my life? And no one has ever told them that they need to believe anything. No one has ever said, these are the rules for coming through this door. No one, because we have none. No one is, well, we have some rules. You have to have some clothes on. Even pajamas. But my point about that is, it's a sense of freedom that comes in here that says you don't have to believe anything to be in here. The only thing we ask is you come and let the worship service be a teacher for you. In the freedom, faith is born. In freedom, cultivation and changed lives happen. In freedom, all of a sudden we walk out the door sometime and we realize, as my cousin and I were talking about last night, I'm happy. Where did that come from? Another thing that I've learned throughout these years is Nike was right. Just do it. The church was founded on spiritual guidance, not permission. You don't have to receive permission from this church in order to believe or do even what you want to do here. No one is saying you have to be a certain thing or a certain person. Experience, strength, and hope are our guidelines of what we share, not what you need to be or what you need to do. I must say this, though, I am a product of the 60s. I believe that fighting bureaucracy at all costs is the way all of us should go. I don't care what bureaucracy it is, it's wrong. And that's still a part of my whole being, and I'd love to be saying to you, at 75 years old, I've changed now. Now I'm much more happy and feel good about the denomination and politics and everything, and I must say I'm worse than better. Over the years, a couple of things have happened that make me quite upset about the bureaucracy of the United Methodist Church. One time, a number of years ago, there was a band of people of this church that gathered together to try to get me ousted. And they went to the bishop, they wrote a bunch of letters, and they did a bunch of things, and they decided that they didn't like it because what this church was a loosely group of people that didn't follow the United Methodist way. We had this or that. We shall never be organized. And yet, we kept flourishing and growing. And so, we had a meeting. It happened at Keys Cafe again. And it was a time in which a group of people came and gathered around another group of people. Bobby, you remember that? In which they presented the case to these other people. You were there, Ted, weren't you? And this needed a change, to which another group of people said, you know, if you don't like it, get the hell out of here. And they left. And it wasn't because of me. It was because of freedom. It was because of the ability in the program has taught us that we have a sense of compassion and care and freedom to do things differently. You don't have to be. You're encouraged to be or not. We shall never be organized. The church was founded on it. I've seen it work week after week in small group spiritual meetings that most of us attend. I've seen church functions so well organized that they cease to be all over our country. I've seen United Methodist Church fail after fail after fail. But the beautiful thing that I've noticed was I didn't fit, and it grew. I didn't fit, and I knew the bishop would never move me because we go across the street, and the church would fold. And so because of that, there was a tremendous freedom that was here that I never felt before in church. It was a freedom to be me, and hopefully the freedom to be you. It's totally different in this congregation. Two things. There's a mission of brokenness in this service. Now, I have to tell you, those of you, few of you that were here right at the beginning, when we were here right at the beginning, like in the first month or so, we had a very small little group of people, and I really worried, this was at the old church, I really worried we were going to function, we were going to make it. I didn't think we were, because there was no kind of mass. It would be like, if there were a dozen people here and we were going to have a church service. I mean, you can have a church service, but here's what happened. 2 vans pulled up with Larry Bonnewell from CRC. A number of women from across the street at Emma Norton walked in at that same time, and they used my hand too. And at that moment, we became a church. At that moment, we became a church. The critical mass had shifted and changed, and it's been true ever since then. I have thought to myself, as we looked for a new church, there was a possibility for a church up on Summit. And I talked to a couple people in the congregation, what about this church up on Summit? And they said, we should never have a church up on Summit. We should always have a church down in the lowland. We stopped working up there. We stopped looking up there. We started looking down here, and God gave us the opportunity to have this place. If you walked in the first time, you would say, what the hell are you guys thinking? I thought it had parking. That was the greatest thing that it had, and it still does today. The rest of it just still did. So, we are also a church of transformation, of transition, of people coming in and out. If you took every person that had ever been in this church throughout the last 20 years, there's thousands of people that have been in this church that in transition have moved from this church to someplace else. Sometimes relapse, sometimes back home, sometimes out of treatment, sometimes back into treatment. Sometimes their church has past has called them back, because now all of a sudden some things make sense to them, and they've gone back to their old church. That's to our success. That's to us being who we are, helping people grow where they are. Not that they have to be A, B, C, D. That it's okay to be who you are, and move wherever that might take you. Today may be that day in which you choose freedom. You may sit and you may say to yourself, what is it that I need to do in my own spiritual life? What is it that I need to do to be feeling better about my life? How can I gain some freedom from my past, from the shame, from the fear that I have? I'll tell you how. I'll tell you the best teacher you've ever had in your life. And it's right up here. When we break this bread and we offer this cup, something uniquely happens. Some spiritual process happens that we really don't know about, and we try to talk about, and we always fail. Something happens spiritually in the very act of communion. And I'm not talking Roman Catholic stuff, fubu-jubu here. What I'm talking about is that these elements spiritually become for us something different than they are. And so it can be the primary teacher of changing your life. It can be that moment in time in which you stop for even a brief moment and say, God help me. Be with me. Walk with me here. Help me as I walk out this door to be a different person. Let that spirit move in your life. Call it whatever name you want to call it. That spirit that can help you transform your bad feelings of who you are into good feelings of being a blessed person. That's the most important thing this church can ever offer you. Is that brief, holy moment in which a broken person can feel whole and new. What a gift every week to come back and feel their presence. Jesus, God, higher power, Spirit, Mother Earth, whatever we're calling you this decade, listen to us today. The waters are deep, the world is barking. I want freedom from fear and shame. I just want inside me a moment of peace and love. Be with me. Hear me. Help me this day. I am free. The chains of my past have been broken. Thanks be to thee.